What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Stephen Thompson. Here with my good friend Jack Markowski. We are here after we just watched the Pitt Panthers knock off NC State 67-64 on the road. An ugly game, an ugly second half, but the Panthers still pull out the win somehow. They are now 6-6 in the ACC. They move into a three-way tie for seventh, and they knocked off the number 5 team in the conference, the team that was sitting in fifth place in the ACC, one of the teams that was playing better among most of the teams in the ACC, and they do it uh, while playing a pretty overall poor game, I would say. I don't think this was the cleanest game they've ever played before, but I think the headline is another gritty win on the road. They are their fourth ACC win on the road, and I believe their sixth win overall in road environments. So the Panthers just, for whatever reason, seem to really thrive away from home. Jack, what do you kind of make of this phenomenon? The Panthers really kickstarted this run through ACC play with a huge win on the road over Duke, and they've sustained it with some big wins. Not just at NC State, but at Georgia Tech, and I believe I'm missing one more in there. But they've really built this second half surge in ACC play on the road, doing it away from the Peterson Events Center. What do you kind of make of that phenomenon, and what does it say about this team?
Yeah, I think maturity is definitely a part of it. I think when you look at guys like Lowe and Carrington, they're not perfect. And they're freshmen. You sort of expect them to make some mistakes at times, but they're staying within themselves. They're not, letting the crowd noise get to them. They've improved a lot as the road winning streak and, road record has really grown in their favor. They've come up clutch. I think Lowe's 2 free throws again at the end of the game. Who knows what would have happened if he missed 1, maybe 2, could have changed the entire equation. Pitt doesn't foul. So, I think those clutch situations, the entire team has really done a good job of closing out games and showing up when it matters most. And I think a big part of it too is playing with that energy, that edge that Capel has really, harped on the entire year, especially on the defensive end. That showed up early in the game, and then in the second half when they jumped out to that 13-point lead right at the beginning. You can't sustain that necessarily for all 40 minutes. I think you sort of saw the guys get a little gassed at a certain point, but it gives them such a big advantage when they are all locked in. They're playing connected on the defensive end. They're moving off the ball on offense. So, and I think, in a certain way, they take it as somewhat of a challenge when they go on the road. They want to prove themselves. They know that they're the underdogs in a lot of these games too. Confidence plays a big part in it. They've stacked up these wins on the road in the ACC, and I think you could even throw in playing in an environment like West Virginia in the out-of-conference schedule, where they've come in and they've earned wins in these super tough environments. That experience is priceless. It really pays off in spades, especially as the season goes on. That could be something that we see come into play in the ACC tournament, and it's a little early to talk about it, but the NCAA tournament. So, I think they really have become road warriors in a sense. You feel super confident about them putting together a complete performance for the most part, and it gives them an edge that not a lot of teams have shown thus far.
I was really careful when I was coming up with our show notes to not mention the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament at all. I didn't think that we should go that far. I'm glad you took it there right away on your own. But hey, man, it's maybe something we got to start thinking about. I mean, I had my dad texting me saying, okay, if they do this, can they get back onto the bubble? But I think you made a good point about those 2 freshmen really maturing and really growing. I think. It's not just kind of handling the crowd noise as well, but it's kind of all the facets of playing in a road environment. It's the pressure of a home crowd, but also the pressure of a team who feels very comfortable in the gym that they're in. They're counting on you to be more uncomfortable, and they're going to pressure you. And you saw NC State try to exploit that. And I thought Pitt, especially before Carrington went to the bench with foul trouble in the first half, they were able to break that press really easily. But I think your best point was about that edge that they play with. And I think they play with more of an edge when they're on the road, because I get the feeling that this team really enjoys being the villain. I think you saw that a little bit in West Virginia, but you kind of assumed that it was just a product of playing in a rivalry game. And then you saw it again at Duke. Obviously, that was a huge display, and the Panthers were giving it right back to the Cameron Crazies all game. But then I think you saw it again tonight. I mean, there was a moment where I think Jalen Lowe got fouled. He's laying on the baseline facing some NC State fans along the sidelines, and he's jawing at him, and they're jawing back. Like, and then after the game, when the final shot like caroms off the buzzer, you see Lowe, who I get the sense, at least off the court, is kind of a soft spoken, mild mannered, like doesn't love to draw attention to himself kind of guy. He steps on the court and he kind of becomes a different animal. Like he loves the spotlight. He loves to not just face a big crowd, but to shut up a big crowd. And I think the rest of the team, from Blake Hinson to Jalen Lowe, and I mean, even Carrington is an ultra competitive guy. Zach Austin loves to celebrate. Leggett does it in a quieter way, but I think this entire team really enjoys proving people wrong, and really enjoys being the villain in a road environment. So I think that plays into it as well. And when they play with that kind of energy, that kind of force, that kind of edge, I think edge is the best word for it. They are really at their best. Now, impressive win. Didn't always look like it was headed that way. I thought the first half was very impressive for the Panthers. They played really well. They went into halftime up 8. They held a double-digit lead, I believe, in the first half, or they got it soon after in the second half. But things kind of fell apart late. NC State retook the lead, and even went up by a couple points, but Pitt held on. And eventually got the win. Still, what kind of happened from your view, from half to half? Why were the Panthers not able to sustain what they had done so well in the first half? Because at one point, it looked like they were really going to run NC State out of the gym.
Yeah, I think when you look at their recent track record, I feel like their performances in the two halves almost flipped. We've sort of become accustomed to them being a second half team, and that wasn't the case tonight. It was more so in the first half. And I think a big part of that was that their perimeter shooting fell off a cliff. They were 4 of 9 from behind the arc in the first half, 1 of 12 in the second half. Hinson and Carrington didn't have it going really in general, not even just from, behind the arc. And when that happens, your 2 leading scorers, your 2 guys that can create, a shot on your team, it's just typically not going to end well for the Panthers. The 6 turnovers didn't help. And really, it looked like Pitt was almost stuck in the mud offensively. When you compare how NC State looked offensively to Pitt, it came a lot easier to the Wolfpack. And I think it's really as simple as that. There was less off-ball movement, less flow to Pitt's offense. They seemed stagnant. They didn't generate the amount of quality looks that they did in the first half. And I think you have to credit, Kevin Keats and NC State for making that adjustment. I think that sort of showed up in the first half too at the end. Before Pitt's final run in the closing minutes. But NC State on offense, they took good care of the ball. They dominated in the paint. Of course, DJ Burns had a good game, DJ Horn, and they had no answer for it. NC State played with more of an edge, as we were talking about earlier. They were more crisp with their ball movement. And I think Pitt was honestly saved by NC State's lack of free throw shooting. They were aggressive in the paint. I mean, they established position all night. Nothing Pitt was doing down in the post was working against Burns or even Ben Middlebrooks at certain points. So that could have been a major factor in a loss. We could easily, the script could have been flipped in that aspect. So, yeah, it's rare to see them struggle in a second half. I think there was a combination of factors that sort of played into it. I don't think there's anything, to be super worried about from their performance. But yeah, I think NC State figured out something that worked. Pitt did just enough to, close out the win, and they sort of got away with one.
Yeah, definitely. I'm inclined to agree with you, and I'd put a pin in those comments you made about DJ Burns and Middlebrooks having great nights, because we're going to talk about the front court in a second. But I agree. I think it kind of started on the offensive end. I think Pitt missed having Carlton Carrington out there in the second half. He sat I believe for most of the second half with some foul trouble. He picked up his 3rd, I want to say, in the first half. He picked up 3 fouls in the second half, didn't foul in the second half, but played 20 minutes in. Oh, excuse me. He actually picked up all 3 of his fouls in the second half, but they were early and he had to sit a bunch. And I feel like that's where you could kind of see things start to fall apart a little bit. They didn't handle the pressure from NC State as well. They turned the ball over a few times in really silly ways, and they just let it affect their half court offense a ton. And I feel like when things got desperate, they started to do some of the things that they did in December and early January that really sunk them, which was stand around on offense, settle for long jumpers and 3-pointers instead of attacking the rim. And I felt like during this it's not necessarily a win streak. I mean, they've won 3 in a row in the ACC now. They've won 5 of 6, 5 of their last 6. But I felt like during that streak, they were attacking the basket a lot more. They were much more forceful going to the basket. They were generating much better movement. And you could see that carry over in the first half. They were just it feels like a cop out to just say it was energy, but it really was energy. They just moved a lot better off the ball. They were much cleaner. They were stronger. It was just a completely different energy thing from the second half, which I think leads to a point that you made about them looking a little tired, just looking a little slow. And they get about a week off, 6 days off before their next game, but it's the kind of thing that I don't think you can let happen repeatedly in ACC play and expect to get away with it, because again, to your point, they got a gift from NC State, and that gift was a 4 of 11 shooting night, I want to say, from the free throw line. 6 of 15, sorry, for the game. It was 4 of 11 at one point, and that kind of takes us to our next point. I mean, Pitt was remarkably good from the free throw line, well above season averages. They shot 90% from the line in this game. It really saved them in the second half when their offense was really, really stagnant. And Jalen Lowe came up huge with 2 clutch free throws in the final few seconds to really put the game away. Can we expect more of this kind of free throw shooting from this team? Do you feel like they are more what they've shown for most of the season, which is that they are closer to a 65 or 70% free throw shooting team? Or is this 90%? Can we start to see that a little bit more from this team?
I mean, I think you hope that the 90% starts a new trend where you do see an uptick in their numbers, but they've sort of shown us who they are from the free throw line. I think tonight that they really benefited from the guards being more aggressive, getting in the lane, drawing fouls. I think Pitt did a good job of drawing Burns and Middlebrooks out of the paint at times, which helped open up lanes. I think that sort of caused NC State to press a little bit, so to speak. They were 12 of 14 in the second half, which, when compared to NC State's output was, made all the difference in the world. And I also think they benefited from guys like Hinson and Federico not getting to the line a ton. I know Hinson was 3 of 4, but still, Guillermo went 2 of 2, which, in such a close game, he's not a great free throw shooter. That made a big difference. So I think it could be sustainable, especially from the guards. I think it's really just about everybody else establishing some form of consistency. With free throw shooting, I think it really flows from game to game for a lot of guys. So, of course, you hope that there's sound improvement there, but I think they're going to have to show me a little bit more down the stretch for me to really believe in them as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with that, but I also kind of fall on the side of, I think this is closer. I think they are closer to an 80% free throw shooting team than they are, a 70% free throw shooting team or something like that. I mean, when I think about some of their real close losses or some of their really tough free throw shooting performances, I seem to recall Federico getting the ball in position to shoot free throws quite a bit. And I think that's obviously an awful situation for them to be in. He's just repeatedly been sent to the line because he's in the middle fighting for rebounds, because he is often just like stuck with the ball at the top of the key, and he's an easy guy to foul when their offense goes stagnant in the second half. They got the ball into the hands of the right guys in the right moments this time. You made a good point about Hinson as well. Like the 3 starting, not starting guards. I mean, Jeff Capel said the other day that he feels like Ish Leggett is a starter, even though he technically comes off the bench. But those 3 top guards, Carrington, Lowe, and Leggett, combining to go 13 of 13 from the line. Like those are the guys that in those big moments, when you're late in the game and you need buckets and you need points in a tight game, those are the guys who should be getting the ball. Those are the guys who should be controlling the offense. They need to stop. And it happened at points in this game, but they were just leaving Federico about 35 feet from the rim in a close game. Like a smart team is just going to foul him. and they're going to take, at best his 1 of 2 from the line, or, his 0 for 2, and they're going to live with it, especially in a close game. So I think they got the ball in the hands of the right people, which helped a lot. Jeff Capel, I think, made some good moves. He was able to make some good moves going offense versus defense with Diaz Graham, who, despite the results not being as good, has a better form, I would say, than Federico, and a better touch from the line. So I think it's a little bit situational, and I think they are also to go along with what we talked about with maturity a little bit. I think a little bit more. They're more apt to be calm, I think, as a team in these moments after playing in some of these environments and surviving in some of these environments. And I think you can also just maybe hope that momentum is a part of it too, and that seeing some shots go through the rim really helps this team and propels them forward. Told you to put a pin in those comments about the front court, and we're going to come back to them right now. I mean, bit of a weird night from Federico, but we're seeing this more and more. He's rebounding pretty well, but still not a super massive offensive threat. He was 4 points, 2 of 4 from the field, 10 rebounds. Diaz Graham didn't give you much else. In limited action, in 12 minutes, he committed 4 fouls, did block a shot, but 2 of 2 from the free throw line and 1 of 3 from the field, didn't make a 3. I'll let you go first. I kind of have a hard time making some sense of the front court right now. They've been maligned for pretty much all of the season. I don't think they've played particularly well for most of the season, but I don't know. Something about just watching Federico play in the Wake Forest game, and then tonight in the Notre Dame game, I feel like he is maybe not necessarily turned a corner, but I think he's finding a role. I think he's doing the things that he does well a little bit better, and maybe not trying to do too much. But what do you just make of the front court's play tonight, and what are you any more confident in their abilities now, or just where do you stand with the front court at this moment?
I would say in terms of my confidence with the front court as a whole, I am more confident in Federico. When it comes down to Guillermo Diaz Graham, I think you saw him sort of get manhandled all night. Like, he's just not somebody that you want playing the 5, playing inside against guys that are posting him up. But going back to Federico, I think he had his moments for sure. There were times where he struggled against DJ Burns, but down the stretch in the second half, he came away with a few pretty big stops. He also had that big second chance layup with about 30 seconds left. So post defense as a whole is still an issue. I think you have to worry a little bit about his, intangibles in terms of positioning. I feel like he leaves his feet a little too much at points, but some of that comes down to coaching. At some point, I think you do have to adjust to the way that you're, guarding DJ Burns, who was killing them in the post all night. So he's coming off of a good game against Notre Dame, like you said. I think he's a guy that you just have to accept that he's never going to be super consistent. I think it's, a big matchup based, thing with him. Same thing with Guillermo, and even with Will Jeffress, hearkening back on the Wake Forest game. I thought that they might have found a solution there. I don't think that's really a long-term, sort of thing that Jeff Capel is looking at implementing on a game-to-game basis. But with Federico, I think that what the player is at this point. He's a decent rim protector. You see the flashes, much like last year, where at the end of the year, when he didn't play against Mississippi State, or he got hurt, that caused a lot of panic, and for good reason. He was a defensive anchor and such an asset as a rebounder too. But at this point, it seems like he's just either hit or miss. If he could find that consistency again that he was playing with at the end of last year, where he was one of the best defensive bigs in the ACC, probably, then there might be a permanent solution there. It's just, he's so tough to crack. Like, it's just, there's no consistency. There's matchups where he'll thrive. There's some matchups where he might be borderline unplayable. And that's just something that Capel needs to figure out as part of the front court equation.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's a pretty tough nut to crack. But like I alluded to, I feel a little bit more confident in Federico, and I think you made a good point about just he kind of is what he is. You're watching him getting bodied by DJ Burns over and over again, and you're watching him. You're thinking about the Wake Forest game when Efton Reed was doing that as well, and I get it. It's frustrating to watch him get bullied like that and to get him watch him get kind of overwhelmed physically. But I think it's also kind of falls on coaching at some point. Like you have to know your players, know your personnel, know who's limited, know who's not, and know what you can do against certain players. Because I think my biggest issue with how Federico guarded both Burns and Efton Reed was that he was just kind of letting them catch it too. And I mean, that goes to the guards as well. Like you got to put some pressure on the passer. But if Federico fronted Reed to a lesser extent, but Burns is a guy who's only 6'9". Federico 6'11", has a couple inches on him. Let them try to make that pass over, and let Federico just put his arms up, try to get a hand on the ball. They just let Burns like back down Federico and catch the ball without really much of a challenge. And then even when he caught it, there wasn't always a hard double coming. They didn't really seem to have a good plan or a good handle on how to double. And I mean, it hurts that NC State was shooting the ball the way that they were, because that kind of neutralized what you could necessarily do through those doubles. But I don't know. I kind of find myself being more confident with Federico. I think he's doing the things that he was doing last year at a decently high level. Like if he shouldn't be taking a ton of shots a game. Like that's just not Pitt's best offense. They should almost all be on offensive rebounds. If they are putting the ball in his hands in offensive sets in the half court, it's just more likely than not going to end well, especially if he's holding on the ball for more than probably 3 seconds. So I think as long as they understand personnel, as long as they understand how Federico is limited and what he's good at, they can find a role for him and they can play around him in a way that makes him really successful. But there were just times tonight where I feel like they kind of hung him out to dry a little bit. And, it's on Federico because he's limited as well. But I think it also goes back to coaching. And I think you're spot on about Diaz Graham. There's just hasn't been much there. And when he's not shooting the three well, there's really nothing there. Nothing much to grab onto. So, another up and down night for the front court. We'll see how it keeps moving forward. The good news is I don't think they really have. I mean, I guess they got to go down to Clemson to face PJ Hall, but they won't really face another guy like DJ Burns for the rest of the year. So at least they got that going for them. But speaking of what's up next for the Panthers, they get about 6 days off, like I said, before arguably their biggest game of the year, I would say. They head down to Charlottesville, Virginia on next Tuesday night to face the Virginia Cavaliers. This is the hottest team in the ACC. The Panthers might be right behind them. Virginia has a 7-game winning streak right now. They are undefeated at home. The Panthers have the second best road record in the ACC, like I mentioned, and they have the second longest win streak in the ACC as of right now. That could change by the time they head down to Charlottesville. But I mean, what kind of chances do you give the Panthers to beat a Virginia team like this that is playing some of their best ball of the year? Do we think that Pitt can kind of keep it up and keep this good thing rolling?
Yeah, I think that the 6-day break is coming at such an inopportune time for them. They have the ball rolling, they have a ton of momentum, but it is good for them to regroup and rest their legs. Like you said, UVA is one of the hottest teams in the ACC and the country. They're on a 7-game ACC winning streak. At home, they're on a 23-game winning streak, which I believe is the best in the country as of right now. So they're a tough matchup. Like you said, I think it's their most important game of the year. They're number 34 in net, number 49 in KenPom. They're firmly in the tournament discussion. They're at the top of the ACC standings, obviously. So it's another team where, defensively, they only allow 57 points per game. They have a great coaching staff with Tony Bennett. They're disciplined, hard to score on, always fundamentally sound. So Pitt's going to have their work cut out for them. I don't know how much you can really take from last year's matchup if you're Jeff Capel, but that's, at least a feather in your cap, I guess you could say. It's going to be a low-scoring affair. I think it's probably going to be like a first to 60 or 65 wins. They held Miami to 40 points, under 40 points potentially yesterday, so it could even be lower than that. Pitt should definitely have confidence going in because they've sort of earned that with the way that they're playing right now, the winning streak that they're on. They could walk away with the win, but not only is it their most important game left, but it's their toughest game left. More than likely, it would be huge. It's not out of the question. I think we just have to wait and see how Pitt looks after that break. and against the UVA team that's, firing in all cylinders, much like they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think you're right. This is going to be their toughest game, in addition to their most important game. I mean, you look at road trips to Clemson and Wake Forest left on the schedule. Like, those are tough, but Pitt really front loaded the most difficult games on their schedule, and got a little unlucky with a Virginia team finally hitting their stride when they come to town. But I think this kind of plays to Pitt's biggest strength, in my opinion, which is their defense. Like, Pitt has been a pretty consistently good defensive team for most of the year. I think it's going to come down to a little bit of execution, but mostly who has the better shot makers on either side. And I don't know. I'm willing to give that advantage to Pitt, at least for right now. They've at least 4 guys who can create something off the dribble. They have Blake Hinson, who can go nuclear at any point. Same thing with Jalen Lowe, who can kind of get hot out of nowhere. Ishmael Leggett, gets them tough buckets seemingly out of nowhere. And then Carlton Carrington is always liable to put up a 15, 16, 17, 18, 20-point night out of nowhere. So I feel pretty confident about Pitt in this game going into it. I mean, obviously, Virginia, you can't argue with the pedigree, and you can't argue with the recent history. I mean, Pitt's win over them last year, I think, was the first, I want to say, or only the second in about 11 tries for the Panthers. So I wouldn't say a win down there is likely, but I think you should feel as confident as ever that this team can pull it out. We'll be there to report all about it and give you some more content through the weekend. No basketball this weekend. This is the last game until next week, like we said, but still plenty to talk about as the Panthers continue this hot streak and look forward to, like we said, their biggest game of the season. With that, we're going to head out of here. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and follow all our reporting at InsideThePanthers.com. Panthers are hot. They're heading into their biggest game of the season, and Pitt football is getting underway. We got some great stuff up about the Panthers as they introduce new offensive coordinator Cade Bell, a host of other transfers, and try to replace defensive line coach Charlie Partridge. So make sure you're tuning into all that we've got coming out for you, and we'll see you all next time.